In this video, we'll be taking a look at pages 3 through 6 of the Lesson 2 packet. So this is part 2 of the Lesson 2 video. On page 3 of your Lesson 2 packet, you'll see a matching exercise where you are asked to match the circles of evaluation shown on the right with the corresponding arithmetic expression. Now what that means is just we're matching it with the math that's over in the left-hand column. So for example, let me take a look at example 5 or number 5 because it's the simplest one. We see negative 5 times 2 and we need to match that expression with the circle of evaluation on the right. So we notice that when we take a look at C, we see a circle of evaluation where multiplication is the function and the two inputs are negative 5 and 2. So we know that number 5 must be C. So keeping in mind that inner circles, here, 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 and here, keeping in mind that those inner circles represent an inner set of parentheses, I'd like you to finish up the matching exercise on your own. So pause the video now and do numbers 1 through 4. So after you finish the matching, please check your answers and make sure that you have the right answers here. It should be D, B, E, A, C. All right, let's take a look at the bottom of page 3. Intro to coding. The code rule that's given here is basically telling us what pieces need to be seen in a piece of code that the computer will actually understand. Remember, we have to speak the computer's language for it to understand us. So the code rule that is shown says that each open parenthesis is followed by one function, then by one or more legal expressions, and finally by a closing parenthesis. So let's take a look at example 1. Write the code and evaluate. We have seen this circle of evaluation multiple times at this point. It's telling us to subtract the numbers 4 and 5. So in code, we need to start with an open parenthesis, then the function, in this case it's subtraction, leave a space, your first input is 4, leave a space, the second input is 5, finally a closing parenthesis. That is how we would type 4 minus 5 into the software so that it can be evaluated. If we actually want to evaluate this, we know that we are going to get -1 because 4 minus 5 evaluates to -1. We can type that right in our calculator if needed. Example 2, draw the circle of evaluation and evaluate. So this right here is written in code. You can see an open parentheses, multiplication is the function, 5 is the first input, -2 is the second input, and then your closing parentheses. So as a circle of evaluation, we need a circle and a horizontal line to separate the top section, which is where our multiplication symbol goes, from the bottom section, which is where our two inputs go. So that's our circle of evaluation, and if we actually want to evaluate it, we're going to take 5 and multiply it times -2, and of course get -10. So what I've done here is I've opened up wescheme.org. This is our editor where we are actually going to be writing code. So on the right-hand side of the screen, which is the interactions window, I want to demonstrate for you how we type in code. We start with an open parentheses, and for example, number 1 was 4 minus 5. So the way we type it is the subtraction symbol, which is our function, 4 and then 5 with spaces in between those inputs, closing parentheses, and when you hit enter, the computer will evaluate it for you. Keep in mind, 4 minus 5 written like this will not work. We'll get an error when we hit enter. Okay, example 2 was 5 times -2. So to type that in code, open parentheses, multiplication, 5 and -2 with spaces in the appropriate places. Close the parentheses, hit enter, and it evaluates to -10. So back to the note packet, bottom of page 3, example 3. Draw the circle of evaluation, write the code, and evaluate the problem, 100 divided by 5. So when we draw our circle of evaluation, we know that the function here is division, so we're using the slash for division. Our first input is 100, and our second input is 5. So that's what our circle of evaluation looks like. The code is going to need an open parentheses. The first thing is the function, which is division. Leave a space. First input is 100. Leave a space. Second input is 5. And close the parentheses. And to evaluate, we're dividing. 100 divided by 5 is 20. And since evaluate means get an answer, we have done what's asked in example 3. Example 4. When a circle of evaluation has circles inside of it, as we see in this example, the inner circle requires its own set of parentheses. Try writing the code for the circle of evaluation to the right and evaluate it. So the first thing I want to do is write this circle of evaluation in math, the normal type of math that we've seen in the past. Then I want to write it in code. So this circle of evaluation is telling us to take 6 as our first input and multiply it times our second input, which is a circle of evaluation stating that we should be adding 4 plus 5. So in math, writing this out as we normally would see it, we want to take 6 and multiply it times 4 plus 5. The 4 plus 5 requires its own set of parentheses because it was an inner circle of evaluation. So in code, we need to begin with an open set of parentheses, first writing the main function, which in this case is multiplication. Leave a space. Our first input is 6. Leave a space. And our second input is a circle of evaluation in and of itself. So it needs its own set of parentheses. Function first, we're adding. Leave a space. First input is 4. Leave a space. Second input is 5. Close the parentheses, and then close the main set of parentheses that were at the beginning of this line of code. So the yellow set of parentheses that I just highlighted go together, and the blue set of parentheses that I just highlighted go together. If you have 2 opening parentheses, you do have to have 2 closing parentheses. All right, so at this point, you can flip to page 4, and you should be able to complete this matching exercise on your own. You're matching the circles of evaluation in the left-hand column with the code in the right-hand column. So pause the video now and take some time to do page 4 on your own. And here are the answers for the matching exercise on page 4. Check your answers, correct any that are wrong, and try to identify why you made the mistake you made if you did make any mistakes. If you got them all right, that's wonderful. Let's move on to page 5. On page 5, we see a chart with 4 columns where one of the columns is filled in each of these examples, and we need to take what's given and convert it into whatever is asked in each of those columns. So for example, the first row has a circle of evaluation showing 4 minus 5. So in math, in regular math as we've seen it our whole lives, how do we write this circle of evaluation? Well, we write it as 4 minus 5. In code, however, we have to, of course, start with parentheses. The function goes first, then our 2 inputs, then a closing parentheses. So that's what it looks like in code. And then, of course, evaluated, we know we get -1. We've seen this same circle of evaluation several times, so we're an expert at it at this point. Let's take a look at the second one. We see a circle of evaluation indicating that we're taking 351 and we're dividing by 4 minus 5. So in math, in our first column, we would write this out as 351 divided by, which is most easily shown as a fraction symbol, 4 minus 5 down in the denominator. Written in code, we need to begin with a set of parentheses. Division is the main function. 351 is the first input. And our second input is an inner circle of evaluation. So remember, that requires its own set of parentheses. So open parentheses, subtraction is the function, 4 and 5 are our inputs. Close the parentheses for the 4 minus 5, but then close the parentheses for that whole line of code. So we do see a double set of end parentheses here. In the final column, when we evaluate this, we're doing 351 divided by 4 minus 5, which is really just -1. So we do get -351 here. I'd like to ask you to pause the video now and try these last two examples on your own. I will give you one hint before you pause the video. In this next example, because there are two separate sets of parentheses, this circle of evaluation will actually have two inner circles of evaluation inside the larger circle. So pause the video now and try these two examples on your own. So at this point, you can go ahead and check these last two examples on page 5 and make sure that you filled in each of the columns correctly. Please make sure that when you have an open set of parentheses, it does eventually get closed. Okay, you'll notice in this example that I'm highlighting, each set of parentheses in these different colors was opened and closed. If you do not do that, you're going to find that you're going to keep getting errors. So let's move on to page 6. What you'll notice when you flip to page 6 is that this is practice. There are 4 examples where you are asked to write the circle of evaluation, write what's called racket code. Really, that's just another name for code. And down at the bottom of page 6, you'll be asked to evaluate each of the 4 pieces of code above. So once you evaluate each, you can write your answers down here for 1 through 4. So this should be independent practice. This should be something that you can do confidently, hopefully. And you can pause the video now, do this page on your own, and I'll come back with the answers once you hit play again. So at this point, you have pressed play again to check your answers. So go ahead and take a look at these first 3, circles of evaluation and code, and check to make sure that your answers are exactly like mine. You may want to pause the video now to give yourself enough time to check, being careful to check for details, parentheses, symbols in the right spot, that kind of thing. So if you need some time to check these answers, you can pause the video now and check this screen. Otherwise, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom half of page 6 where we see the final circle of evaluation with the corresponding code. So go ahead and check that as well as the answers when we evaluate each of these pieces of code down at the bottom. So what I'd like to do now is demonstrate for you the examples on page 6 typed into code to show you how this piece of software can evaluate for us. So the first one was 5 times 10. So when I correctly write that in code, making sure to close my parentheses, I find that it really does evaluate to 50. The second one, we were adding 8 and 5 times 10. So of course I need an inner set of parentheses here. Watch, when I close one set of parentheses, it lights up on both sides to show you that you've just closed a set of parentheses. But in order to finish this line of code, I do have to do the final set of parentheses, and it will indicate that it knows that now the whole line of code has been closed and it's ready to evaluate. So when I hit enter, I get my answer of 58. On the third one, we were subtracting 8 plus 2 and 5 times 10. So when I close my set of parentheses on that whole line of code, I hit enter and I get my answer of -40. In the final example on page 6, we are dividing 5 times 10 by 8 minus 2. And when I finish my line of code there by putting in this final closing parentheses, I hit enter and got my answer of 8.3 repeating. So this is the end of our Bootstrap World Lesson 2 video. See you for Lesson 3.